This video is sponsored by Ridge. More on them later. Few features of modern games are as divisive as QuickTime events. I can see why people hate them because they often end up shoehorned into games that aren't built to house them, or into moments that really don't need them, but I'd argue that, like with most video game tropes, they can be done well if given enough care. Artificial interactivity is a problem, but not even a factor if you can work in QuickTime events more organically, and to the extent that they feel like a natural extension of regular gameplay. QTEs can be really cool when done well, and so it's up to me today to shed some light on an often neglected and underloved part of video games that, when on top form, can give you the sort of satisfaction that is hard to come by sometimes. All it takes is one little button press. That's not a bad trade.
My task today is a simple one, because every time you hear people talk about QuickTime events, it's, to lament the decline of the video game industry and how we've traded our actual immersion for a timed button press, but personally, I'm a lot more positive these days because I've long since traded out my chunky leather wallet for one of these sleek front pocket wallets provided by Ridge, today's sponsors. And you know what? One of these days, I'm gonna get a chainsaw and try and cut this thing in half, and I'm not gonna be able to do it because it's chainsaw proof. But it'd be fun.
It might be encouraging to hear that I was once like you. I used to own a chunky leather wallet that made it look like my Brazilian butt lift had gone horribly wrong, but one day I saw the light and was saved by Ridge, who were kind enough to sponsor today's video with their incredibly sturdy wallets that are available in more than 30 colours and can hold up to 12 cards that you can now carry around in your front pocket with a bit of style. Plus, Ridge were also kind enough to send me their waterproof commuter backpack with a shock-resistant laptop holder, and their larger Weekender duffel bag, which both have an external USB port for on-the-go charging, and when the world stops being on fire, I'm gonna be using these a lot. Ridge comes with a lifetime warranty, so you can buy one wallet for the rest of your life if you so wish, with a 45-day return window for a free refund if you're not such a fan. Get 10% off today with free worldwide shipping and returns by going to ridge.com/RabbidLuigi and using the code RabbidLuigi. It's time to move your wallet into the future.
Alrighty then, let's get going. Oh, okay, now we can go.
The first time I remember being annoyed at a QuickTime event was Resident Evil 4. It's maybe not the single thing that people remember the most from this game, since there's plenty else to take away, but that stupid knife fight with Krauser that takes place entirely within a cutscene and through a series of QuickTime events on the Wii? Fuck, it's so hard! I don't know what possessed Capcom to go in so much on QTEs in this game, but sadly, this continues over into the sequel, where Resident Evil 5 has yet more QuickTime events that come out of nowhere in cutscenes to give you a cheap death. At least this game is consistent with making Wesker the best part of Resi 5, and he makes this game better whenever he's on screen, QTEs and all. That's why I don't mind the end of this game too much, because there's a lot of Wesker and explosions and QuickTime events and even the occasional boulder that needs moving. But how can I move it when I am just a man and I don't have a bulldozer or an explosive device or a Pokemon? Stand back, my right thumb's got this one.
Resident Evil is a lot more fun to play when it doesn't take itself too seriously. I know these games can be terrifying sometimes, but this franchise has its roots in B-movie horror, and so it can be really entertaining when the franchise remembers this long enough to do something campy and ridiculous. Because how else are you going to describe punching the hell out of a giant rock?
To be fair, the whole last third of Resident Evil 5 is deeply rooted in that B-movie schlock that is generally really entertaining to play through, as long as you're in the right headspace to not take it seriously considering what Wesker turns into by the end of it. But this brief interlude with the boulder is easily my favourite part of the whole sequence because of how it's somehow the most absurd part of all of this. I don't want to sit here and say that Chris Redfield punching a boulder so hard and so much that it rolls forward into the lava and creates a platform to cross said lava is unrealistic, but I do have an easier time believing that some people think that the sixth game is kind of okay. It's more than that though, because initially Chris is trying and failing to push the big rock, but then he and the game suddenly have a spark of inspiration to thump the shit out of it. And you know what? It fucking works, doesn't it? Maybe not the best, most intuitive use of QuickTime events that gaming has ever seen, but few moments have ever given me such a satisfying sense of, yeah, okay then. It gets referenced in Resident Evil 8, so Capcom know that they've got something special here. Don't try this one at home. Chris has special skills.
There's a really fine line to walk with games that are mostly QuickTime events, and I think it comes down to how you feel about QTEs in general. If you outright hate them, for a start, this probably isn't the video for you, maybe go somewhere else. But if you're even slightly open to the possibility of using QuickTime events, then maybe you'd be interested in a game that is mostly QuickTime events and fully embraces that concept. Especially when they do them with a bit more panache.
Heavy Rain is often a tricky proposition for some people because every tiny action requires you to tap away in your controller like a DDR pad, and that's fine for high-octane action sequences, but sometimes things slow down and now you're brushing your teeth and, oh, now you're having sex with QuickTime events. Man was not meant to meddle! If you want something a little more consistent, then you can do a lot worse than Asura's Wrath, which has its fair share of ridiculous QTEs, primarily played for laughs, but is also very keen to dive headfirst into the exciting world of stylish action that sees Asura leap around like a flea and throw punches at everything that moves, all while shouting very loudly. Asura's Wrath isn't exactly QuickTime events from start to finish, but they are used to punctuate some of the more climactic moments of a boss fight, much in the same way that a game like Okami does. Though Okami never had you fighting a god who makes himself larger every time you beat him, eventually ballooning up to the size of a planet. Oh, so it's that kind of game. I'm a curious boy, often to a fault, and so I knew about Wizen before playing Asura's Wrath for the first time because I think I saw a video that talked about really big boss fights that had Wizen as the thumbnail, and I just had to know more. It takes him a while to get there, but Wizen's whole deal is that he can shapeshift into bigger and bigger versions of himself, and towards the end of his boss fight, he decides to become bigger than the planet Asura is currently on, which is called Gaia, but it's basically Earth. What precedes is a shorter portion of the boss fight where Wizen tries to smush Asura with one finger, because he's giant now, he can just do that, and Asura's Wrath sets its stall out as a game. That being that Asura can overcome any obstacle if he gets angry enough, and sure enough, being crushed by a finger is enough to get Asura pretty miffed. To the extent that the only next step is to hold the country-sized fingertip up above his head, furiously punch the shit out of it to the point of breaking those arms, and ending in basically the most perfect way imaginable. This frame is one of the most satisfying things I've ever seen. This whole fight comes down to one final punch and one final QuickTime event after so many button inputs, and the fact that Wizen gets disintegrated from the finger up because of this punch just gives you more and more layers of satisfaction on top. This has all come from the first boss fight in the game. Holy fucking shit. There's this almost unwritten rule that QuickTime events are kinda goofy. I suppose they are to an extent since they install a door on the fourth wall for easy access so that you're given a handy reminder what button needs pressing and when, but I disagree with the idea that this showcase devalues the moment. Well, for the most part, there are plenty of examples of a QTE undercutting any and all emotion and replacing it with forced actions with virtually no kind of fail state for maximum artificiality. But I still think serious games can have QTEs without serious moments being ruined. One that came to mind almost immediately with this topic was Metal Gear, which is a franchise with a mixed history of QuickTime events, with awesome finishes in Rising being diluted by the torture scene in MGS1, with Snake slithering through the microwave in the fourth game landing somewhere in the middle. These games don't use QuickTime events often, but they're usually memorable. Even more so when it's the last thing you do in the game. MGS3 is my special baby that can do no wrong, so maybe I'm a bit biased, but I've always loved how this game ends. The whole debriefing cutscene is expertly crafted with some outstanding music, and this is hot on the heels of a boss fight against the boss that tests everything that you've learned in the game up until this point, in part because she kicked the shit out of you twice before. There's a lot going on towards the end of this game, and it can often feel like it's running at a frenetic pace, with few moments to pause for breath, so you can imagine how significant it is when you defeat the boss, watch the cutscene afterwards where she asks Snake to finish her off with one last bullet, and the moment just hangs. There's no button prompt, possibly because it wouldn't be appropriate, but more likely because you don't need to be told what to do. There's some potential to let it hang for as long as you feel necessary, but in the end, it's your finger that has to pull the trigger. Your final direct involvement in MGS3 of any kind. Yeah, you know what? I think QTEs can be serious after all. You don't need haptic feedback when you design your game like this.
Not every game that uses QTEs is capable of doing so with flawless execution all the way through the game, and I suppose that's the consequence of trying to do QTEs often to make sure that they don't feel like a gimmick. You know, you can't complain about something coming out of nowhere if they're laced through all throughout the game you've been playing all this time. It's a small price to pay, I suppose.
God of War is effectively the perfect case study of the do's and the definitely do-nots of quick-time events, because, like I said, they're kinda everywhere. They're used sometimes in combat for extra bits of flashy damage, they're used to avoid environmental hazards, which are usually punished with a free game over, which is always fun. You got sex scenes that are slightly less hilarious than Heavy Rain's mannequin sucking face, and from those examples, you'd be forgiven for thinking that God of War has never really understood how to use QTEs effectively. Maybe it feels like a gimmick shoehorned into as many places as possible, but the truth is that these are only here because Santa Monica wanted something to accompany the awesome finishers in boss fights. I like combat that saves something extra for the end, as might be obvious when we talked about Asura's Wrath earlier, but to put it bluntly, you play God of War to watch those incredibly violent finishers. A spectacle that puts you in the driving seat thanks to those QuickTime events. Makes it all worthwhile, don't it? I maintain that across every God of War game, there's never been an end to a fight quite like the opening boss fight in the third game, which is, in of itself, quite the event as you take on the god of the sea Poseidon and his giant water horses. It's basically the best opening you could hope for from a game like this that perfectly encapsulates the type of grand occasion that every boss fight may well be going forward, and clearly the only way to cap it off is with, honestly, the best finisher in the whole franchise. These can get pretty violent sometimes, but the way in which the point of view switches to Poseidon with this prompt, in a game that has only been released for PS3 and PS4 with both of their controllers having control sticks that are pretty close to eye width apart, I mean, it writes itself, doesn't it? It's such a devastating finisher because of how that POV shot gives you an immediate rush of surprise, admiration that Santa Monica would think of something like this, and a heavy dose of wincing because it just feels too real. Someone on the dev team looked at the action the player does when they activate Spartan Rage and couldn't wait to have a QTE eye-crushing in the future. It's a dream come true for someone out there. Giving story significance over to QuickTime events is a popular, albeit dangerous move. Like I said with the end of MGS3, there's a worry that giving all the emotional weight to one button press might not be the best way of doing things unless you know 100% what it is you're doing and what you're hoping to achieve. Again, I don't think it's a bad idea if you have QTEs at appropriate points throughout the game to warm the player up to the idea of critical moments being decided by QuickTime events, and this is something that the wonderful 101 absolutely nails. It's a Platinum Games game, and so much like Bayonetta, QTEs are everywhere as part of standard combat, and so you get into the rhythm of waiting for them to show up. Funny thing is though, that failing them is almost as fun as doing them properly, especially since you're not punished too harshly for screwing up, and just get a funny cutscene to watch. That being said, it doesn't devalue the QuickTime events, and given the wonderful 101's proclivity for ridiculous action, you can probably see where this is going if you've played this game before. Why protect the Earth with actions when QuickTime events are a hell of a lot more exciting? Wonderful 101 is basically just a lesson in constantly one-upping yourself, and the final mission of the game couldn't be better equipped at demonstrating that. Every QTE you do is more ridiculous than the last, with more at stake within the story, and so by the end, you're facing down a giant evil robot in space whose death laser is charging up at Earth, but luckily you and your team have come together to fire your own laser back to counter. What follows is a giant laser tug-of-war between Evil Robot and your final ultimate legendary Earth Power Supermax Justice Future Miracle Dream Beautiful Galaxy Big Bang Little Bang Sunrise Starlight Infinite Fabulous Totally Final Wonderful Arrow through the utter annihilation of the B button. I generally don't like button mashing, and especially not as a QuickTime event, so you need to believe me when I say that Protect Earth gave me some of the biggest goosebumps I've ever felt when playing a game. It's like poetry in motion as I'm spamming my controller and the main characters are doing the same, and the whole moment washes over you as just the best thing that QuickTime events have ever done. You're telling me I can press a button and that'll protect Earth? Fuck yeah, we're doing that.
It made me so happy seeing the wonderful 101 remastered instead of floundering on the Wii U, because it is capable of producing moments like this and turning QuickTime events into gold dust. You kinda need to get on that. This is RabbidLuigi, and if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more in the future. And if you want to watch something right now, there's a video here about games you can't play anymore. I also want to thank my top supporters on Patreon, including the Green Scorpion, Sarah Malion, and Jerome Sankara. Thank you for watching, and protect that goddamn Earth.